All right, this is Tim Cain on Grind, one of my personal controversial words for game designers. And just in fairness, my voice is starting to go, so if it gets a little bit crackly or I start to fumble my words, just know that I've been doing a lot of talking today, so I apologize in advance. Grind is one of those terms that I say that if you're defining your gameplay loop as grindy, you've made a mistake as a game designer. Now, some people like the grind, but I think that in order to enjoy a gameplay loop, you need to design it in a way that players don't look at it as grind. They might still refer to it. They might say, "Oh, it's the grind." But I like the grind, right? I like the grind of training certain skills in old school RuneScape, and others are just a shitty grind. Agility, mining, okay? I like these skills on the surface. I like what they allow me to do in the game, but there's no denying that training these skills is just, in many cases, not very fun, even if there are some mini games that do make them a bit more fun, right? So grind is a term that I think gets thrown around a lot to describe a gameplay loop that is not enjoyably repeatable. Then the game is called grindy, right? Or that system or that feature is called grindy. Let's see what Tim has to say on that.
Hi, everybody. It's me,
Hi,
Tim.
Tim.
Today I want to talk about grind.
Yeah.
Specifically, Raul Gigondes asked about grind. And in fact, he even said, I thought you had done one. I looked at a lot of your videos. I couldn't see it. I thought I had done one too. And I think what's happening is I've done so many videos now that buried in some video I have that's on a completely
Probably
different
mentions
topic,
it, yeah.
I may go off on a tangent for a minute and talk about grind.
I'm
But I
surprised he
haven't
doesn't
actually
have
done a
one.
video on grind. So let's do it. First, I'm going to define it because I've learned I need to define my terms clearly. Then I'm going to
Which, by the way, not to pause it at less than a minute in, but that's me. I like to yap, and I like to make sure that these videos have some sort of uniqueness to them, and not just are me saying, "Oh yeah, Tim, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you for the video." 10 seconds added to the runtime, right? Um, Defining what something means is by and far one of the most important things you can do in a meeting as a game designer. It's the reason why when I make game design documents, I put an overview at the top and sometimes the goals as a separate section so that players can see what this system is in a nutshell and what it's trying to achieve. And then we can jump into the nitty gritty so that when they say, "Oh, why is this like this?" Oh yeah, that's right. Because one of the goals was to do this, or for the players to feel X or Y. You need the grind where things drop and make you go, "Oh, my, I got it," but you need drops that are good and you don't have a hell of a time to upgrade. Yeah, it's just like balance, right? That grind itself plays into both the gameplay loop and balance. Sometimes, like I mentioned old school RuneScape, if you have better XP per hour, sometimes those grinds don't feel like grinds anymore. It's just that they were imbalanced. It's not that people weren't having fun with the loop. They weren't having fun with the amount of times they were asked to repeat the loop. And all those things need to be asked. Like, okay, you're not having fun with this gameplay loop. Why? Why do you not have fun with potion craft? Oh, it's because when we started making potions, it was really enjoyable, but then you have to repeat it over and over and over again, and it became grindy. Okay, I see, exactly. The issue was not with the loop itself, but with how often you were asked to perform the loop and how many iterations of the loop you were asked to perform before the game completed. That's a good differentiation to make. Like D2 does it great. You have the common and rare drops that you can go through the whole game, but these have extreme rare drops that make you go, "Oh my god, I got this drop." Yeah, the chase items, right? And PoE1 is similar like that. You have those what we would call in game design as chase items, that you have the normal drops, but then you have those 1 in 10,000 chance that you might get one or two of those throughout your entire time playing the game, but there are still 20 more for you to farm if you like and want to grind for those.
talk about how it's different for different people and why it even exists and if you can make a game without it. So let's get to it. First of all, what is grind? Well, at the highest level, you can think of grind as anything in a game that you do over and over and over and
A
over
loop.
to achieve some goal in the game.
Yeah, and a good example is like Darkest Dungeon, right? That the grind came from leveling up your heroes, and you did that by performing the loop of going in dungeons and fighting things, opening curios, finding trinkets, killing monsters, getting um, heirlooms to upgrade your town, right? So this is the loop that you were asked to repeat, and the grind for many people came from the number of iterations that they were asked to perform of it, because maybe too many heirlooms are needed to upgrade the hamlet, or my heroes aren't leveling up fast enough, right? And so your game needs to have enough variety to enable that longevity. And it's going to be different, right? For different people. Some people might say, "Oh, the game was perfect in length, and I didn't feel like I was grinding." And some people might say, "I wish the game was 1/3 the length because I felt like it was just grinding the same thing over and over again." It depends, but really, variety can fuel that spice. And you might look at a game like Stardew Valley, right? Why do you not get bored just farming crops all over and over again? Well, it's because you have fishing, you have the community center, you have the mines, you have relationships to form, you have new upgrades to progress with your farm, you have animals that now you're ranching and not just farming, right? So there's all these little meta layers of that add to that loop, or things that you might focus on in one season that you might not have focused on in a prior season. So you've added variety to the core gameplay loop here, and the grind of upgrading and getting better now doesn't feel like a grind. It just feels like you're engaging with things that you didn't engage with before. Valheim Copper, I'm not familiar with Valheim, but maybe you can explain to me why it feels like it's grindy. EverQuest was amazing back in the day. All you had was explore and kill things, and people in the game made the story of the game. Yeah, just to some extent too. That's also a good point, where a game that requires the players to build their own stories, like The Sims, I see The Sims as boring because I am not its target audience. I play The Sims as me, and I choose the game designer career path, and I have a nice family and house, and then I die, and I lose interest in playing the game altogether. It's not meant for me to recreate my real life. It is meant for people to create stories with people, and the people that are really into The Sims like doing that. They like making new characters and new families and getting into all these crazy things, and it's like, oh, yeah, that game's just not for me. So, different strokes for different folks, right? Some people see it as grind, some people see a loop as boring, and other people won't. You have to find your niche, and you have to be confident that your game fills a niche that is large enough to have that return on investment, and you need to be confident as a designer that you're creating a gameplay loop that isn't asking for the players to repeat it over and over and over again, that will eventually lose interest. A good example is our game Colden Chronicles. I need to make sure that alchemy is not done so much to the point that it becomes unenjoyable, or does not have some meta progression to it where it feels um, like the player has learned everything they need to know. And honestly, it could get to that point. I might have that problem, and I need to be aware of that and find some resolutions to it.
Maybe it's getting XP, maybe it's to get an item that drops, maybe it's to get material for crafting, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to do it over and over and over and over and over again, a lot of people call that grind.
If they don't
I'll give you a perfect example of grind. The first time I remember seriously having encountered grind when I was playing EverQuest back in the late 90s.
There you go, Shrilduck.
They had a lot of trash mobs, and they also had mobs because once you got over a certain level above a mob, it would often stop being kill on sight to you, and it became a trash mob. So what was a great mob for a level 1 or 2 character to take on when you were level 30, they were trash. You could
two good examples recently were like Dragon's Dogma, where at a certain point the frequency and density of enemies just becomes annoying. Or like Throne and Liberty, I played recently. I tried it, of course, because I'll try a new free MMO. Why not? It was just filled, like the entire map was just blotted with enemy spawns. Like you would have I'll draw on Tim's face here. Sorry, Tim. You would have like a map like this, right? Or like a region. And it felt like it was just dotted everywhere with enemy spawns. Like they just randomly generated some massive density of enemy spawns, and I was like, Jesus Christ, I just want to go through this area without aggroing half the fucking map. Hey, Midra, I'm gonna play Pantheon. I don't know. I don't know what my playstyle looks like.
Throw one AoE spell and blow them all away.
We will see.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Necromancers, to summon their pets, needed bones. And bones dropped off high-level skeletons just as frequently as they dropped off low-level skeletons. So the easiest thing for you to do as a necromancer was go to some level 1 zone and kill all the skeletons in it. Because then they drop their bones and you could get them. Now, it was faster to do that yourself. Just run in there, AoE, a bunch of skeletons, loot their bones, take off. The nice thing to do, however, would be to yell out, hey, I will pay a platinum for a stack of 20 bones, and let all the first and second level characters run around, get those bones, which weren't marked no drop. Then they could come over, they could give you the bones, which you really wanted, and you could give them a plat, which they really want, which to you at like level 20 or 30 is, I got a ton of plat. They don't.
I see the issue here. Yeah.
Everybody wins. Yep. Didn't always happen, but I just remember that being a source of grind, because even when you're level 30 and 40, when it's absolutely not a problem for you to get bones, your pets at that level still needed bones to be summoned.
This is kind of the issue with a lot of MMOs that have those few or forced worlds. So in a lot of MMOs, you have to choose a server that a character exists on, and therefore you cannot transfer your character. You can't do it very easily, or there's like some cooldown for transferring your character. By the way, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. I think that it encourages this sort of messy farming where other people are negatively affecting your experience by farming the same mobs, or high levels are coming in to steal your kills when you're just trying to enjoy the leveling experience. I hate it. I vastly prefer a game like old school RuneScape where they have like 200 servers. If somebody is farming a mob or a boss on your server, you just switch server. It's one click. Okay, different German world, or different US West or East world. Okay, this one's clear. Awesome. Or somebody's chopping the trees in your area, although that's not really something that you would be competitive over. But maybe you just want to be there alone. It's like, okay, switch worlds. Done. I vastly prefer that over this oftentimes forced, you're in there with a dungeon with 3 other people that are running around trying to farm this gear, and somebody is way higher level and just losing it over and over and over and over and over again. Lose server reputation? What do you mean? Oh, you mean like, yeah, like your view on that server? I mean, sure, if that matters to people, I guess. I don't know. I would rather have an enjoyable experience playing the game than be forced into having an unenjoyable experience. I mean, I get it's like, I don't know. There's just 2 different ways to make an MMO. But I know that my worst experience with that was in Elder Scrolls Online, where I'm trying to like farm a dungeon and its bosses for loot, for like the rare drops or something, and some higher levels in there trying to do the same thing, but they just come in, kill it in a few hits, and it's like, okay, well now I don't get my loot. And there's nothing I can do about that. Now I am playing your game and having a negative experience because of the way that it was designed. I have no good feelings towards this person. I have no good feelings towards this dungeon. And there's nothing I can do except hope that he gets it and leaves, or I log in at some later time and that another person isn't doing the same thing. It's not fun. It's not well designed. It's not enjoyable. I don't think there's any way to defend that sort of design. Well, here's the thing. I mean, if you have an identity in a server, then just mainly play on that server, right? And maybe there's other people on there that you'll get to know. But also, old school RuneScape solves this by making a lot of bosses instanced. So if you want to fight that boss, you load up a fresh instance where you're alone, or with friends in some cases. Therefore, people can exist on the same world but not get fucked over with drops. Or they introduce a group boss where everybody who partakes in fighting that boss gets some of the loot. and maybe the MVP or a few players that do most of the damage have a slightly higher chance to get better loot, right? There are ways to mitigate it. There are definitely ways to mitigate it. And I'm not a fan of the way that like the shared server where everything is shared. I think that if you're gonna have a problem where necromancers need bones, you need to introduce enough spots. Once the problem exists, right? Because you may not have assumed that this problem would exist, and it just kind of comes about from the natural play style of people playing the game. Well, then just introduce an update that adds another graveyard or a few of them, so that this isn't an issue anymore, right? Played New World for a bit. I was always annoying when I wanted a specific type of tree as a low-level guy to sell in the market to make money. But there was always some high-level dude showing up with his turbo gear and harvested the entire forest before I was done with one tree. Yeah, exactly. But I think that a lot of games have that issue with player-driven economies where if there isn't a big enough sink for those lower level resources, the price of them and the need for them is always going to be low. So it's just going to be kind of like, okay, there's not much use until I get to late level. I know that was kind of funny in Elder Scrolls Online where the lower level resources were actually the ones that were the most expensive. So if you sold things early on as a character, you would make a lot of money, but once you got higher level, it was actually a lot harder to make money. It's tough. It's tough having that sort of economy, I think. I solved this with instant content, which was controversial according to the John Stats book. I don't know about that one. For low levels can get valuable items. Con, now there can be high levels out competing with low levels. Yes. And there's pros and cons to all this. But I don't think instance content is bad if that's what players want. I think that there can just be, if at any point I'm having a negative experience because of the way that you design the game, at the end of the day, if it's not my fault or something that I can manage, then it's kind of an issue with the development or the design of the game. And it's not like that can always be fixed or mitigated perfectly. But when I'm farming, when I'm in a game like Elder Scrolls Online and I'm going to a dungeon that is my level to farm a boss that I can kill or an upgrade that my class specifically needs, and I can't do it because some high level's there, what am I expected to do? Like, what am I actually expected to do? And I don't know if there's a perfect answer to that that would dramatically change the entire way that the game is designed.
I always thought that maybe they should drop it after about level 15 or 20. Like you now have, because they give you new spells for higher level skeletons and just say they don't need bones. But they didn't do that. From this description, though, you can see that grind is different for different people.
Yep.
One person's grind is another person's fun.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that is when you're farming things, when you're farming materials, or you're farming certain enemy types. Either you're looking for drops, or you're looking for reputation, or you're looking for XP. It doesn't matter. Some people thought farming was fun, and other people hated it. I knew people in EverQuest who loved to sit on spawn points and wait for things to spawn, kill them. They would just sit there and they'd chat with their friends. You know, they'd sometimes do it in a group. They'd chat with their friends, the mob would spawn, they'd kill it, they'd collect the loot, and then they'd sit down and talk some more. One of my friends called EverQuest a chat room with orcs. And that's how they treated the game.
I mean, to some extent, a lot of MMOs solve this by having those player-driven economies, right? So you can engage in the content that you find fun and make money from it to then speed through other aspects of the game that you don't like. So in like Path of Exile, for instance, in the first game at least, very few things are untradeable. It's usually just like quest items. So if you want to make money doing a piece of content like blighted maps or delve, because that's the grind that you find fun and you don't see it as grind, make money through that and then just buy your headhunter instead of farming it from some other content, right? So I think that's good design, where it's like you have enough variety to engage in content that you find enjoyable. And if you want to then augment your progression by buying things from other players, you can do that. And that's a good way to solve the grind, where it's just like, again, like I said earlier on, variety is oftentimes the solver to this, by just making sure that 90% of players like this, of system A, but 10% find it grindy. So make a new alternative for that 10%, and maybe some of the 90% too will find that more enjoyable. And then you have options. And the grind then just becomes which place gives the most gold per hour, if that matters. If you can do that, right? I mean, if you have 5 options and they both give relatively the same amount of gold per hour, I mean, you kind of have a choice there, right? Or maybe you just one is easier but doesn't give as much gold per hour. So in like old school RuneScape, you might choose a skilling option or a fighting option that is lower gold per hour, but it's more AFK. So it's going to take you longer to get the same amount of gold, but it will take you less. It will be less intensity. So either choose this method to get this amount of gold, and it takes this amount of time, or choose this method, and that's your option. Players won't always choose the most gold per hour if they can't perform the most, the methods that give you the most gold per hour.
Now, a lot of people hate grind. They hate it. They hate it so much. There are so many diatribes on grind. Go to any game forum board, go to Reddit, go wherever you want. People are like, grind is stupid. I hate grind. Grind is boring.
What they're actually saying is they dislike the amount of time, like we said, the amount of times they're being asked to repeat a gameplay loop that they don't find has enough variety to sustain itself.
But then you have people weigh in and go, I love grind. It's fun. It's relaxing. It gives me a feeling of accomplishment. Mm-hmm. Another friend of mine thought grind in some games. We were talking about grind, and he thought, well, that's just arcade play. It's an RPG, but at this point, it becomes an arcade-like game. You're like, you're going in, you're boom, 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 see how many of these you can kill, see how many things you can get in one fireball, see how many things you can get with one grenade. Okay. It's just an arcade style of game. And I'm like, okay.
I can see that.
And then one last thing about why it differs. Sometimes it depends on the game. You can have two procedures that if I described it to you would sound like grind, where you have to go in and kill a lot of creatures. You have to clear an area.
So many games and so many parts of other games can be described as such, right? It's really easy to boil down most systems and games that when you just describe them on their surface, they sound grindy. Most of the time, right? And I think that non-game designers often have the most worries when a core loop is described. Like when I describe Cauldron Chronicles, our game's core loop, it's get commission, make potion, finish commission, consequence, right? Pretty much. It sounds kind of boring, but it's like it depends on all of these sub loops, you could almost say, like the open world gameplay loop is what are you doing there to actually collect the ingredients? And are those things that you're engaging in fun to where you collect ingredients, but you don't make conscious note of that this is the only thing you're doing. You're like, oh, I was fishing. Oh, I was farming. No, I was doing a dungeon. I was killing some mobs. I was finding a secret, solving a puzzle. And these are all things that can reward those ingredients. And you may not think that that's what you're doing. That's the hope, at least. And so it doesn't become grindy. It becomes just you engaging with that aspect of the game. It provides a lot of variety and ways to have fun, to solve the core problem, right? Which is in our game, collecting ingredients. In other MMOs, it might be getting gold, getting materials. But if they provide you with enough of options to get there, you can pick and choose the ones that at any moment feel like the most interesting ones to engage in. Maybe it is farming, maybe it is fishing, maybe it is exploring and collecting. And like I said, in most cases, I think that variety solves the issue with grind. But that also is the content of the game. That is also the variety. I just use the same word, but it's the cost. Is from adding in the content that fleshes out the world and fleshes out the gameplay loop.
In a really great game, people are like, that was one of the most fun parts is when you had to kill out that goblin army.
Yep.
Another ones will go, that's horrible. It's, in a different game, they go, oh my God, I can't believe I had to kill so many goblins. And this is what I mean by that. That can be the same person.
But that can also be dependent on, I mean, like anything with game design, it depends, right? But a lot of that can be dependent on pacing. That sometimes, like Tim says, killing out that army worked because maybe what you were doing before then wasn't wiping out an army. But in a game where you're constantly wiping out trash mobs, wiping out an army of trash mobs, it's like, oh, more of the same. Wonderful.
In different games, making a complaint about something they liked in another game. An otherwise great game will sometimes get excused for the elements in it which in any other game would be considered grind.
Yes.
So that's another reason why
true.
grind is hard to define, because even your definition may not apply for you to a particular game because you like that game.
That's a very understated point. I actually wanted to talk about that on stream one time. Was that if the general consensus of a game is positive, people are way more willing to excuse the bad parts of it, right? And especially too, if hype is high, players don't want to feel like their money was poorly spent. And if the general consensus is just pushing it a little bit more positive than negative, it can sometimes result in a community unwilling to talk about the things that are bad about the game, right? They want to like the game, they want to like the developer, and so therefore they're like, oh, it's not as bad as it is. It's confirmation bias. Is that the right term for it in this case? I think that it's similar. If that is not the right term to use in this case, it is at least very similar to. It's like it's almost like herd mentality, I guess. Right, where if the herd is going this way, it's hard to go against it. People don't want to go against it. Game design is actually a lot harder than it seems for most genres. Yeah, it really is. Definitely is. It really too. It just depends. Like, what's your market? Okay, we're making an ARPG. We're making PoE 2, but now the market for PoE 2 is actually different. It's almost like a subgenre of ARPG at this point. It's carved out a new corner, and it seems to be working. But for some people, it doesn't work. Stockholm syndrome. It could be some of that. I think there's also too a sunken cost fallacy, where people just feel like, oh, I spent $80 on this AAA game. I need to like it because otherwise it means that my $80 wasn't spent well. And so I don't want to hear from other people that the game is bad, so I'm going to defend it. Right? Just know, by the way, that don't let anybody on the internet tell you that, or anybody anywhere tell you that you can't like a game. Whatever I say about PoE 2, or if I say some bad things about Baldur's Gate 3, or maybe it's Dragon Age Veilguard, if you enjoy it, enjoy it. Okay, that's all that matters. That's why you buy games. That's why I buy games, is to enjoy them.
So let's talk about why grind even exists. There are a few good reasons for grind to exist. Grind promotes exploration. If you need to harvest a certain material, like something berries off a tree,
It's a what's the word? I'm trying to think of. It's a breadcrumb. It's a fuck. There's a word for this, and I can't think of it. But it's the call. It's the call to adventure. Is the need to do something, the need to obtain something, right? And the grind, the amount of time and effort spent put into something, can sometimes correlate to the positive feelings when you finally obtain it, right? It's all a psychological bit of the dopamine feed, right? Is what are you getting and how much effort are you putting into getting the thing? So if a game just gives you, if it cheats you, all of the materials that you need to craft, where's the fun in that, right? Maybe the fun is from crafting, right? Maybe the game is about crafting. So they don't make it too hard to obtain the resources because they want you to feel the dopamine hit comes from crafting. So it's like, as a game designer, you have to ask yourself, where are the dopamine hits? And is the amount of work and effort put into that and the variety of gameplay to get to that point enjoyable enough so that that dopamine hit feels earned?
or from a node, and those harvest materials spawn in different points throughout a zone at random. This gives you a reason to explore, because especially if once they spawn somewhere, until it's harvested, it won't respawn anywhere else. You have to run around the zone and look for these things.
Yeah.
This is a great way of getting players to look around a zone that otherwise wouldn't. They just stick to the roads, they'd stick to where their quest markers were. Grind is also great because it's an always available method to get just that little bit of money or XP or reputation when you're close to a boundary and you don't want to go off and do a whole new dungeon. Don't want to start a whole new quest line. You can just run out, kill a few things. You got the money, you got the XP, you got the rep that you needed. Boom, done.
Well, in a lot of cases too, if you're farming money, if you're farming like a mob that drops multiple things, likely you might just be there for one of those things. You might just be there to make some money, right? And they drop cash, but they also drop a little bit of materials. So at the same time that you're grinding for thing A, you are getting thing B, C, and D, and you can then look in the future and say, "Oh yeah, I needed bones from skeletons. Oh, that's right, I farmed bones because I was getting something else from them, like I don't know, their weapons or something, or the materials they drop." And it's like, oh, I'm glad that I did that because now it's giving me the ability to fast forward this skill or this grind now that I engaged in this other thing. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of ways that you can do it, and by making things useful, by giving things useful drops, that feels good. So Stalker 2 is a good example of this was done kind of poorly. That I'm wasting my ammo and durability on killing mutants which do nothing for me. So these are fun fights. These are cool enemies. The heart rate spikes, but then there's absolutely no reward killing these mutants. I can't harvest parts. I can't take these parts to the scientists who in other games would pay more for these parts. So you need to have that rewarding feeling because that's the dopamine, and it doesn't feel like I'm wasting my time, which again is, I think, where again what grind kind of boils down to, right? When you're asking why is the player feeling negative things about this? It's because they feel like they've wasted their time or that it is not as rewarding. And that's kind of how I feel with PoE 2. I get that not everybody feels that way though. Like the Souls-like type of grind where every enemy feels like it could kill you if you underestimate it rather than trash mobs. But also in Souls-like and Elden Ring, nearly every single enemy, which we need to finish our collecting every item in Elden Ring playthrough at some point, has something unique that they can drop that might augment your build in some way. You feel like when you kill a guy wearing really good armor, you might get a piece of his armor. And as it turns out, when you play Elden Ring, that's exactly what happens. When you kill an enemy, like a knight riding around on a horse that's wearing this awesome armor, you can kill him and have a chance to get his armor pieces. So you can farm him, you can grind him for his armor, and then look as cool as him, and maybe it has some really cool set effect or visuals, right? Now, if you only liked Souls combat, yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, people will almost call it like farming. Sometimes I think if it's a positive connotation to the grind, and they'll call it grind if they have a negative connotation to it, right? So like, I farmed this knight in armor in Elden Ring to get his armor. Did you enjoy it? Yeah, it was pretty cool. Okay, so you were farming it. You weren't grinding it. Well, I did grind it. So it's like, it's the connotation, it's the emotions behind it. So, the definitions of those words, the usage of those words, the context behind it does matter a lot. And ultimately, you want the player to feel like their time has been rewarded. Like, they might feel like, wow, that was a tough 10 hours I spent getting that thing. But man, is that thing that I got really good. That is game-changing for my build or my character, or I can sell it for a shit ton of money. Beautiful.
That's why people like respawnable areas. And they don't consider it grind, but it is. And then the last good reason I could think of for why grind exists is it's, especially in multiplayer online games, it's something to do when you're waiting for your friends to log in. You might pick a spot to wait, and you see a field nearby and zombies keep respawning in it, and you just keep plucking them off.
I think even more than that, though, it plays into the experience. When you are in an MMO, like if you're in Gielinor for old school RuneScape, I know I keep using that as an example, but that's the game I play the most. It feels like every single thing that I see in the world has some use. I see some trees. I can chop those trees. I see some rocks that I can mine in Gielinor. I'll pull up an OSRS map so you can see it. Where is it? Click to enlarge. when I'm out in the world of Gillinor and I'm walking past, Lumbridge, I can see these trees here. I can see that there are rare trees. I can see down here there are some spots to mine different materials. And these may not be useful for me, but they might be useful for someone else. And you could almost say that, well, if it isn't useful for 99% of players, then why does this mining node exist in the world? Well, because for that 1% of players, it's special. It's one of the reasons why Old School RuneScape has such a lively content creation community, is because you can do things like chunk locked account, where maybe I need to get to a certain level of mining locked in the Lumbridge swamps. But now it's enabled by these mining spots, which aren't really special for any sort of player, because there are better mining spots in Varrock that are closer to banks. It's cool. It's like, also, if every mining spot is good, then the choice doesn't matter. Exactly. So you need some bad. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right about that. Sometimes that balance helps, and it also spreads players out more, so that if for some reason the Varrock East mine in 200 out of 200 worlds that you can switch to at any moment are taken up, guess what? You can go farm it in the Dwarven mine here in Falador, and there's a bank close by. You can go farm it at Fossil Island, the museum camp mine. There are plenty of options. Notice the grind in OSRS is really well balanced. I never feel like I spend too much time on something. Some people go super dry, but luckily I haven't yet. I mean, and if you go dry on like a boss, right? It's a 1 out of 256 chance to get a good item, and you've killed it 500, 512 times. I get it. It feels sucky, but then you'll be fighting another boss and get something within 10 kills. So it evens out, right? It's all an average. If you have enough RNG, at some point you will meet that average. So yeah, having variety, having options, exactly like you said, Midron, is exactly what gives the game a sense of purpose and a sense of uniqueness, where I feel like I can go chop any of these trees that you see dotted around this map. But for right now, I choose to chop them here. Or I choose to go mine over here, or collect wheat and turn it into flour here if I'm an Iron Man, maybe, because I can't buy it from other players. It's just like there's so much variety to do that at any point I can say, you know what? I don't want to go fight a big boss right now. I just want to go do some farming. I can do that. There's a variety to the gameplay in the skills that I choose to train, and there are varieties within those skills of how I train them, each with their different sets of efficiencies and pros and cons. Maybe one is really good XP per hour, but it gives me no gold. It's purely existing so that I can get XP and not gain any other skills. Maybe a mini game exists that gives me reasonable amounts of XP in attack and strength, but it's not as good as if I just trained attack or just trained strength, right? Theory crafting in OSRS is really fun, finding unique methods that nobody's thought about before. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's why OSRS probably has some of the best MMO content creation on the internet right now. It is still in its golden age, especially like hardcore Iron Man, locked accounts, things like that. Like I locked myself to the wilderness or to the swamp, and I can only train there, and you have to find unique ways to solve problems and train skills that maybe nobody ever did before.
It's just fun.
Just like you said.
It's something fun to do. Maybe you're making a sliver of XP. It's just something fun to do while you're waiting for your friends. Mm-hmm. However, I will admit there are a lot of bad reasons grind exists. Probably the most common reason grinds in games is it's so easy to make.
It is.
You have a spawn point. It spawns some kind of monster. You just put it on schedule. So, every 20 minutes it checks, and if the monsters are dead, it respawns new ones. Boom.
It's much more difficult to make unique content. It really is. And you can see a lazy example of this in Throne and Liberty, in my opinion, where enemy spawns, like I said, they're just dotted around. I don't know if I said it in this video, but they're just dotted around. They're just everywhere. And they have such horrible loot that it's not worth it, but you aggro them so it slows down your character and your camera switches over to them, and it's like, oh my god, I'm not getting any useful drops from this. This is such a waste of my time that I'd rather just do the main quest, because at least I can get those done and make some progress. But now I'm not engaging with the world, and that's what feels like a grind. It feels grindy. It feels unrewarding and grindy. Trying to think of ways to make respawns not feel like respawns, but rather reinforcements. Like maybe they spawn off screen and walk to their location. That takes time though. Like Stalker 2 did, yeah, spawn the behind you. I don't think Stalker 2's respawn system was perfect. I did prefer the way that A Life was handled in the original Stalker trilogy.
Trivial. It also makes the game longer. If while you're playing a game, you have to grind your way through some areas that don't seem that fun and are just full of trash mobs. I remember the word trash.
True, like I do too.
That just makes the game feel longer.
It's a perfect
It makes
way to do
makes
it.
the game longer. And for a lot of people, that is the first thing they ask about a game. How long is it? They don't ask what the quality level is. They don't ask how long is it. And if it's under like 20 hours or 15 hours, like, well, that's bad.
I would rather play a good 10 to 15 hour game than one that felt 50 to 60 hours because it was padded out with a bunch of grinds. I'm sorry. I'll say it. In old school RuneScape, if they just doubled the XP that you get from mining or agility, the game would not feel worse. But they can't do it because some players will say, "Oh, you've lessened my achievements by making it easier for future players to reach the place that I did." And you know what? There's some honesty to that, right? There is some honesty to that. I get it. But also, you are selfish enough to purposefully make the game feel worse for other players just because the game was probably not very well balanced in the first place. I'm not sitting here beating the last boss in Elden Ring's DLC saying, no, they shouldn't have made it easier because now people can't experience it the same way that I would. I'm not sitting here, having played through half, or not even half, but like a third of Stalker 2 with the original vendor prices and repair costs and saying, yeah, they shouldn't have changed it because now players won't get to feel what I felt. Absolutely not. They were both reasonable changes to make the last boss of Elden Ring's DLC easier and to make vendor prices of Stalker 2 and repair costs better. It just made the game feel good. And I'm glad that, people getting into those games now can experience it in a more balanced way. You MTX verticals. Gar said that when he made the game, he never expected people to reach 99 in anything. Yeah, that's exactly true. Yeah. And it's just, in reality, they would make certain grinds feel less worse if they just made XP better. And leagues are proof of that. Leagues are absolutely proof of that.
So guess what? Those people who primarily decide to buy a game based on its length are encouraging game developers to add grind.
If they're expecting the game to be longer, yes. I agree. Or they're expecting so much content that the cost of developing it will go up so much that now the game has to cater to a wider audience or cost more money. And you can look at Dragon Age Veilguard as a good example. The rise of cost in game budgets makes it worse for everybody. You get worse games that appeal to more people, and instead of being risky, and they will cost more money. Simple as that. That's why I liked Outer Worlds. For people who don't know, Outer Worlds was a game that Tim Cain also played a part in. It was a game that I think was reviewed okay-ish, pretty positive, 80, 75, 83%, and it was a short RPG. It was like 20, 25 hours, I think, to beat it fully. I liked that. I liked that it was digestible. But there were some problems with it too, but I don't think they were related to the length of the game. I think they were just related to other systems like the combat and some of the main story and stuff like that. But other than that, I liked the intention of making a choice-driven RPG that was shorter, not longer. Give XP is finding you can grind for whatever, doing it in the right way. You can power level a skill quickly. Yeah, I think though the issue with old school RuneScape and RuneScape in general is that oftentimes people will want to do the most efficient training method rather than the method that they find the most fun. And one of the best things that you can do if you're ever getting into old school RuneScape is to ignore the guides. Ignore the guide saying you should do this because it's more XP per hour, and just simply do what is fun, even if it is less XP per hour.
Just to get their length numbers up. And then finally, grind keeps people playing. It's a psychological
Yep.
ploy to keep you either in the game playing because there's still more things to kill, or to make you come back because you're
A
like,
little bit more
oh,
dopamine.
I never got that, magic stone that thing drops. I'm gonna go. I don't have my friends aren't on tonight. I'm gonna go camp that spawn point to see if I can get that magic stone.
I have 14 out of 15 things in this collection log for this boss. I'm going to grind him until I get that last thing so that it's green. That means that I did it. Got to get the Mirror of Kalandra, right? He's right. I mean, what we've talked about it before, game design is all about psychology and emotions. It's all about manipulating those, and I wouldn't say manipulating because I think that has a negative connotation, but it is about creating those. It's about utilizing them in the right order and the right way to give the player the feelings that you want and the experiences you want. And it is easy to give those constant dopamine hits of farming materials. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it does pay off. But I think that I don't think you should design it in a way. Sorry, I'm dying here. In a way that makes players feel as if their time is being wasted, or that it feels like they're being strung along in some game that the designers have created in order for you to spend 40 hours doing it, where you could just spend 5 hours doing it. And again, this is exactly where we talked about before this video, if you're watching on YouTube, PoE 2 and our feelings about it compared to like Last Epoch. And I just feel like Last Epoch respects my time more. Where instead of grinding trash mobs that can still one-shot me if I'm, not paying perfect attention for loot and for currency, crafting material, sorry. Last Epoch, I feel like I get enough of them that I can engage in those systems, which are fun, and not feel like my time is being wasted. Subject you play RuneScape and do what you want for a while doing quests. Once you hit a point where you're stuck, so you need more skill points, go grind the skills, but do the skills you want and read to. Yeah, just have fun. Just if you play old school RuneScape, just have fun. Do what you want to. If you want to play mini games, do it. If you want to just do something that doesn't get you any XP but makes you money, go do it. That's the beauty of that RPG, is that you can do whatever you want. You can train whatever skills you want.
Stone. Hey, made you come back to the game. Which leads me to my third thing. Can you design a game that has no grind?
Yes. Linear action adventure game. Uncharted doesn't have any grind. I mean, you could say that it might have a little bit of enemy filler, right? You might feel like, okay, this section has gone on a little bit too long, right? I didn't need 2 more of these combat encounters. I'm done with this level. I feel done with it. But let's put it this way. Can you design like an RPG without grind? Sure, right? Because grind is subjective. You can design a game where you are grinding in the game, but you aren't feeling like it. And I think Elden Ring is a good example where there's so much unique content, and there's so many rewards that you can get from enemies out in the world that you are technically grinding souls, or in this case, runes. Sorry, you're grinding not souls, and gaining levels, but you never feel like it because there's always something new to draw your attention that will get you levels passively as you discover it and explore it. Good games without grind, yeah. Story games are amazing. That has no absolutely, yeah. So, but I think maybe he's meaning like, can you create a game that a game in a genre that traditionally has a lot of grind and not have grind? The answer is yes, and there are plenty of good examples of that. But it requires a lot more care and thought put into the world, in my opinion.
Yes, you can. Just design your content that for any purpose somebody would want to do content. XP, crafting, money, whatever. Make sure that you never have any grind that is required, and make sure that there's non-grind content that provides everything they need. So if you have designed your XP curves for how they level up, make sure the quests that they do along the main story arc with a few side quests here and there. Give them all the XP they need, all the crafting materials they need, all the money they need. If you do that, no one has to grind. So
I would say though that I would frame what he's saying here, not that you have to do it. That it is a solution to fix grind. But I don't necessarily agree that you should design an open world RPG game with crafting nodes and then give players all of the materials they need in the main story from the main story itself, and they never have to engage with crafting nodes. I don't agree with that philosophy. But that might not be what he's saying, right? It could just be my interpretation. Um, what I would say is to design the content well enough that for most players, engaging in it, in some of it, a reasonable amount of it, is not unenjoyable. But you can add crafting, but you don't have to do it. I don't like the idea that you add crafting. I mean, again, it depends on the game. Depends on the game. We talk about old school RuneScape or something. You don't have to engage in crafting at all. But if you were to design like a Witcher 3 type game or something, right? Where it's more like single player, you have the content. I think that putting it in there and not forcing the players to engage with it in some little way is not very good, because then you'll have players that play it and be like, "Oh, they had this system in it, but they gave me so many materials that I never felt like I needed to engage with it." And so I don't know, it depends. It depends on the game, it depends on the genre, it depends on the market. It all depends. It always depends. It's game design, it always depends. But I can, for XP at least, I would say he's right. That if you have a main story, the amount of XP you gain from the main story and a few of the side quests should be enough that you can deal with the content that you're expected to do along the main story. Skyrim is a pretty reasonable example of this, right? The main story is not hard. It never was. You kill Alduin, spoilers. It's not super difficult. You just need some pretty decent gear, and you can get that from the main story and from other places that it sends you to. But you can also become overleveled. You can also engage in the crafting systems and the enchanting, the alchemy at a much deeper level and become even better. I think that the best way to avoid grind is to engage players' curiosity with good discoverability and enough variety that when they do need to obtain something better, that it doesn't feel like grind, that it feels more like they are being rewarded for their natural curiosity. And I know that's not very tangible. I know that's not very quantifiable. All I can say is go play a game like Elden Ring and you'll see what I'm talking about. Where you'll be like, "Oh, I reached the final boss and I did never felt like had to grind because I was just like, oh, what's that location? Okay, I'll go up there." And you get a better piece of armor. You get a better weapon. You get a couple more smithing stones. You get more runes. You have progressed your character simply because you were curious and there were a couple of obstacles, enemies, in the way of your curiosity. Simple as that. That is exactly how you reward exploration via you are actually rewarding the discoverability, the discovering of your game via exploration, right? Exploration is your ship, your train to get from point A to point B. You shouldn't say we have a wide big world to explore. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Every game with a big open world map is explorable. But what is there to discover? If this is just like a Mass Effect 1 style map where I'm just driving the what is it? I forget the name of it. The truck over the train, there's not really anything to discover. And it's just like, okay, I can explore it, but there's nothing here that's useful in most cases. Enter a crafting system where you may have to craft a key to unlock the door, but you don't have to use the crafting besides the other crafting the items you need to. I don't know. I still don't agree with it from a fundamental level. Not all open world maps are explorable. Most of them are though, to where my point I think stands on a general level. That usually people make open world games because they are free. You're free to explore them, but that doesn't mean that there are things to discover on that map, or that the things to discover are rewarding. Right? These are. It's almost like there's two extra layers to this. You can make a big open world map. I can do it in 10 minutes in Unreal. But then there's nothing to discover. There's just like I could make just like I don't know some big giant forest. Well, now I can put points of interest on there. I could put randomly generated dungeons. Okay, why would I do those? Well, to get XP. Okay, well, it's kind of boring. Is there anything to obtain from this? No. So there's no reward. And the reward is what gives the dopamine, right? The discovery of something that wasn't found before is a dopamine hit, but the players will do it, and then if they feel unrewarded, they will feel less likely to engage with more of that type of content in the future because they will feel like, oh, it's not rewarding me, so I won't do it. And now the content may as well not exist in their brain. I don't need to explain that because there's nothing out there to find. Exactly, yeah. I mean, if that's what you mean by not all open world maps are explorable, I can agree. I think we agree, just maybe have different semantics for it, right? Where I say there's nothing to discover, but there is something to explore. Just like a desert, you can explore a desert because you as a player don't know that there's nothing to find. You're looking for things to discover, but there's nothing to discover. So it is a big world to explore with no discoverability. And because there's no discoverability, there is likely no reward.
So now grind is avoidable. So if people complain about grind, you're like, you don't have to do it. There's nothing you needed from that field of zombies. However, I'm going to give you some caveats. People will invent grind even when you didn't intend for it to be grind. If
That's true.
You have a monster that spawns every 20 minutes.
And it I mean, you could also say that sometimes you might just imbalance something to the point where I think there's actually a beetle in Path of Exile 2 right now. This is December 17th, 2024. I read on Twitter that there's apparently some beetle that you can farm really easily, really fast for a lot of gear and currency. That was probably not intended, but it's doable. So that is one case where players will naturally invent a grind in order to solve a problem. Or it could even just be to get something faster than you normally would be allowed to, right? And I think that those metas will always exist in games, and as a game designer, you need to be careful about patching those out, because a lot of times if something feels powerful or feels really rewarding, you're taking away positive things from the player and giving them no recourse. You're saying those things are really good and we know that you're happy. Now give it to me and I'm going to take it away from you. And you will not have anything in return. You get bad feelings and I get the feeling that my game is more balanced. And it could be true. It could be true on a design level that your game is now more balanced. But you need to be careful about how you define trade-off, for example. You need to be careful about how you define what is overpowered, right? If the player puts in a shit ton of work and effort and gear upgrades and perfect crafting and skill point allocation to make the game pretty easy to beat and break, you need to ask yourself, isn't that what I wanted players to do? Is to become really powerful in my game by putting in effort? And taking that away may not be the best choice. Maybe buffing other skills so that they can all feel similar levels of power and fun is the better option, even though it's the harder option, right? Because you need to take a look at 100 things or 99 things instead of one thing.
And it drops anything at all. Some people will turn that into a farming opportunity and call it grind, even though it was not your intent. Your intent was just, hey, every night zombies spawn in this old cemetery.
That's true.
What? They drop jewelry? I'm gonna grind it for money. Oh, they're worth 10 XP each. I'm gonna grind it for XP. You don't. That was not your intention. Your intention was you've been told the cemetery's haunted, so there are zombies there at night. It's a lore thing. You did not intend it to be grinding. Boom, it's grinding. Also, some people once they master a skill.
I mean, you create meta spots. Like, you know, if you've played old school RuneScape, you can think of like, oh, the Ammonite crabs on Fossil Island. Why was that turned into a farming spot? It's because they do no damage to you, they have high health and no defenses. So you can just sit there for like 15 minutes and AFK and train your combat XP. And once every 15 minutes, you have to click a couple times to reset their aggro back to the grind. I mean, maybe that was intentional, but maybe it wasn't. And I think that sometimes spots like that you need to allow because you need to ask yourself, okay, is this giving players an inordinate amount of XP? Not really. Is it a high level option for obtaining XP? Nah. Okay, do players have better options for obtaining combat XP? Yeah. Are Ammonite crabs rewarding? No. So players are choosing to do this because it is, in this case, AFK. But then when players have more time to focus on the game, they'll choose an option that is better for them or more rewarding for them. But maybe they're at work, maybe they work an office job and they can just throw the game up on their side, click once every, 15 minutes, and they can progress their account. And then later in the day when they come home, they can do the thing that is more rewarding, gives them more GP, more XP per hour or something. And I think that that's an okay thing to encourage. PvE2 is meant to work hard, feel like you got nowhere in your build. Yeah, kind of how it feels, to be honest, for me. Spend so much time on rock crabs, sand crabs, ammonite. They're rewarding for a bit of herbal XP from fossils. That's true. I mean, I will say this, they're not more rewarding than alternative options. But I like that about RuneScape is that most skills have some AFK way to train them that is really inefficient. But you don't need to put any focus into it, right? Mining shooting stars. You click once every like 30 minutes. Yeah, it's okay. It's probably not that much, but it's like 15 to 20 minutes. And it's not the greatest XP. You can't really make any money from it. But it's you barely have to engage in it. Your build becomes OP, it's broken, your build is supposed to feel hard to play 24/7, they want you to work. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really a fan of the games where, like it with PoE2, where it feels like you're just meant to have this difficult time at every single moment of the game. Like it just doesn't feel like there's any proper pacing for me. And I kind of like ARPGs where I can turn my brain off sometimes. And if there's content that requires me to use my brain and to like super focus, there is content for that too. But in PoE2, it feels like there's way more of this than there is of this. Whereas other ARPGs like PoE1, Last Epoch, Torchlight, Adventures of Van Helsing, Titan Quest, they all kind of feel like there's a bit more of a balance in those two. Games where off meta builds are viable are really cool. I agree. That's one of the reasons that I really like Divinity, Original Sin 1 and 2, is that it is it's kind of brainless to break that game, but because there are so many cool ways to break that game and make really absurd builds, you have something that can spawn from that naturally, like the Barrelmancer builds, right? Like using barrels to kill enemies. That's so stupid, but it's so funny, and it just makes the games feel unique. And I think that Larian is really good at that type of gameplay.
Skill or a behavior in the game or whatever it is they have to do, once they have it at the highest level, they will consider anything that requires them to use that a grind. So if you max out lock picking, if you get your lockpick skill up to the maximum the game allows, when they encounter lockpicks after that, a lot of them are like, "Oh, what a grind," because it doesn't give them anything. They don't get any skill from it.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't get any XP from it. Oh, it's a grind. Do you want just all locks to disappear from the world when you have a max lockpick skill? It's a weird thing, but just be aware that even though things you'd put in that you didn't intend to be a grind, people will consider it a grind.
Usually you would have progression with a skill like that where it becomes so easy that it becomes kind of brainless, right? Like you turn. Here's the problem with that though, and I know I'm rambling so much in this video. This video is going to be so long. I apologize, but if you augment let me rephrase this. If you have a skill with progression where you can remove the aspects of it that are probably the more fun bits of it, now you've just rewarded the player for leveling up the skill and having fun by removing the fun from the skill. So, if you want to make it so that the player reaches max lockpicking and doesn't have to engage in the lockpicking minigame anymore, make it like an option. Because some players might like the lockpicking minigame. Or you've made it so that it's too easy to just kind of like brute force. Like you could even say like Oblivion's. Although Oblivion's was optional, right? Like you could just spam auto lockpick until it worked based on your lockpicking level. And you would break more lockpicks this way, but it was also a way to bypass it if you had a lot of lockpicks. I think that's okay, where it's like, okay, I don't want to use that because I like the lockpicking minigame, so I'll just do it manually every time. That's fun. And I think that's a really good example of the optional skipping that comes from leveling up the skill.
Another reason it's hard to avoid what people consider to be grind is it's people run out of things to do faster than you can make it. So if people like doing quests, but there are only so many quests they can do.
The quests take a long time.
So you're like, I make daily quests that people
Oh, no.
will call those grinds. Oh, there's a guy who gives out a kill quest every day, grind. But
I'm gonna be honest, I hate daily quests. I hate the idea that the game I'm playing is a chore, that I need to log in and do these 5 boring things every day or I will not progress as fast as other people. I hate it. You don't think it's minority opinion? I don't think it is either. I'm glad that old school RuneScape does not have that. It's fun like the first 2 times, but now it feels like, oh, I need to log in and do my hour of dailies. And even if you wanted to play the game and do like a raid or explore a new region, you feel like you have to do your dailies first because you need to get them out of the way. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. Fuck dailies and weeklies and all these monthly things. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable. I get why they exist, and it's because they work. Or it should be more intrinsic to the activity. I think that the way that old school RuneScape accomplishes it is perfect, where there are no daily quests. You log in, you do what you want, and if you don't want to log in for a year or 2, when you come back, all your stuff is there. A lot of your good gear is probably still pretty good. You have all your materials, your pet hasn't died, your crops haven't died, they're still there for you to harvest. Just play when you want to play. Play as much as you want to play. Be as engaged as you want to be. If you want to AFK your combat skills to 99 at crabs, you can do it. If you want to get your combat skills to 99 by only doing Slayer, you can do it. That's up to you. Animal Crossing's the opposite. Oh shit. Tears of Guthix be like, am I a joke to you? But Tears of Guthix is not some overpowered amount of XP. Like, what is it at most? Like, I don't know, 20. It's not even 20,000. It's like a few thousand XP. It's like, okay, you can go spend 5 minutes doing any skill and get that much XP. Not that much.
But these are people who want a quest to do. And they've run out of the main story quest.
And also, by the way, Tears of Guthix you can teleport directly to, and it takes 1 minute to do. And it's available only once a week. So it is like that, but it is also it's very different from an hour of daily quests to do for each faction.
Assuming your storyline isn't infinite, you will eventually run out of them. So people run out of things to do, and then what's left to do, they will just call grind.
Yep,
so even though you don't intend it to be grind, it'll be grind. And then finally, I mentioned that people will complain about length. I have made games that have absolutely 0 grind, and then people complain how short they are.
Outer Worlds.
The original Fallout.
Oh, yeah.
Things didn't respawn. There was no place to go grind. If you wiped out Necropolis, it stayed wiped out. The only way you can potentially grind in that game is just go back and forth in the world map, hoping to get random encounters you can attack. That's the only way of getting things to spawn. Once you clear out a map, it's cleared.
I think that people often misuse the word grind in the same way that people often misuse the word filler. like talking about TV shows, especially like anime, they'll say, "Oh, nothing happened about the main story. That was such a filler episode." It's like, bitch, that's canon in the books or the manga. That was written by the same person that you say is so good at writing all your favorite episodes. It was made by the same person. It really happened. It's not filler. Just because you didn't like that there wasn't somebody swinging at someone else with a sword, you call it filler? Come on, come on. It's fucking stupid. Grinding equals artificial preservatives to some extent. Like we said at the start of the video. I don't know if you were here mid-run, but grind is what people used to describe a gameplay loop or sub loop of the main gameplay loop that overstays its welcome. That was interesting initially, or maybe it never was. That eventually became uninteresting because you were asked. It was maybe it's fun for most people for the first 50 times you do it, but the game asks you to do it 100 times. Now it's grindy. It's grindy because you had your fun with it, and now it's not fun anymore. You've explored everything with it, and you're done. But you're still being asked to do it. Now it's grindy. Killing a bunch of zombies in the graveyard for a quest was cool. Being asked to do it 100 times for some bullshit achievement or to get some rare item drop that isn't even that good because you almost feel compelled to, or because there's some major quest that requires it, now it's not fun anymore. There's nothing interesting about it.
People thought Fallout was too short.
But it's easy to implement, as Tim said. It's easy. It's easy for me to say, we can track how many zombies you kill, and at 1,000 zombies, you will get this big dopamine drop of XP. It's so easy to do.
Short. And Fallout was, 40 hours? But this is back in the day where an RPG would run you 80 to 120 hours.
Also, there were fewer
Outer
games
Worlds was 15 to 20 hours. People complained it was too short. But we didn't want to put in grind.
I liked that it was short.
If you try to make a game without grind, be aware that some people out there, the same people who complain about grind, will possibly call your game too short. That's why I even told the team on Outer Worlds, if the biggest complaint we get is it's too short, it's a complaint I will gladly accept.
Yeah, I mean, you were trying to do something different for an RPG, and I like it. If they say Outer Worlds 2 is also going to be about 20 hours in length, you know what I'm going to say? Great, I can play it. I mean, maybe it's... Hold on, let me see something. Because I think Outer Worlds, the main story was 20 hours, right? But to completionist it was like 40? Yeah, like 40 hours. If they say, we're going to make a game that is about 40 hours, again, to beat with completion, I'll say, great. I can play it for 1 week on stream and we can finish it. That's fantastic. I love that. I like that idea. And I can know that it's going to be dense and full of decisions where I can just kind of enjoy it and not have to worry about grinding out some bullshit or exploring places. It's just like, this is a very catered or curated, I should say, dense experience. BG3 is long as fucking despite my be really enjoying it. I haven't completed even the first act yet. I've completed BG3 like 3 or 4 times. Always gotta leave the people wanting more, in my opinion. They'll be able to hit the line perfectly for everyone, so best not to overdo it. Yeah, I think that's a healthy way to look at it. And yeah, I do think I liked Outer Worlds' desire to make a short RPG. I'd rather have that. But that doesn't mean that I dislike something like Stalker 2, which took us, I don't know how long to beat. 88 hours. I didn't hate it. I liked it. And it felt like there was enough quests and story to engage me for that time period. But there was a little bit of grind, especially early on, because costs to repair were so high and selling costs were low. So they fixed that, and I think it'd be a little bit better now.
So, Raul Gigandes, I hope that answered your question, and I hope everybody else sees the issues with grind, which is it's hard to define. People define it differently. People will find it where you don't intend it.
Yep.
And it has some good reasons to be there, and a lot of bad ones too. Grind.
Ooh, oh my god, that was a long video. I don't even know how long that one was on YouTube, but that one's gonna be quite a lengthy. That's like an hour I've spent on this. That video was a grind. Yeah, it was good, guys. If I don't think I have anything else to say about grind at this point, I think I've exhausted my opinions on it. But that was a great video from Tim. Here's the link, and of course, if you're watching on YouTube, I put the link to the original video in the description. Please, please, please go give Tim the love that he deserves for all these videos. If you're watching YouTube, thank you for watching that one. I will call it there for that video. So thank you, YouTube, for watching that, and I will catch you next time, next year, because these will be my last videos for the year. So see you in 2025, unless I have some secret sneaky stream before the end of the year. I don't know. Maybe I will. Bye bye, guys.